This is Joe Biden. On April 8th, 2022, Biden took to the South Lawn of the White House to mark a very special occasion, the Senate confirmation of now Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
My name's Joe Biden. Please sit down. I'm Jill's husband and Naomi Biden's grandfather.
81 million votes, guys. But then there was a Joe Biden moment that really ended up baffling a lot of people.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping, traveling with him. I guess we traveled 17,000 miles when I was vice president. I don't know that for a fact.
So during an event celebrating the first African-American woman confirmed to the Supreme Court, not to mention the first not to be able to define what a woman is, Biden decided to tell a story about President Xi Jinping of China.
And we were sitting alone. I had an interpreter and he had an interpreter. And he looked at me in all seriousness and said, "Can you define America for me?" And I said what many of you heard me say for a long time. I said, "Yes, I can. In one word, possibilities."
So instead of simply saying, America is a nation that can be defined in a single word, possibilities, he decided that it was the perfect time to name drop the president of China. Makes sense to me. What's your problem? Now, if you've ever watched a Joe Biden speech in full, and why would you may have already recognized his anecdote about possibilities because he uses it a lot.
I've been saying this for over 30 years. When I get asked to define America, one word, possibilities. Possibilities.
So Biden is implying that he gets asked that question all the time. Hey Joe, can you define America for me? Yeah, I don't believe it either. Although there is one plausible scenario. Can you define America for me? Yeah, the 50 states that make up the United States. Shouldn't you know that? That's not how I would define it. Okay, fine, I'll bite Joe. Can you define America for me? Yes, I can. In one word, possibilities. Possibilities. And with that, he can technically say that someone asked him, right? Okay, moving on.
I was overseas at what they call the G7, the biggest economies in the world. And then with the NATO people, and then I met with Putin. So I was asked at one point, "Can you define America for me?" And I'll give you my word to this.
Oh, well, if it's your word, Joe.
I said, I can define America, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart, in one word, possibilities. It's the only nation in the world where we think we can do anything. Now, why do we think that?
I don't know, Joe, why?
Why do we think anything's possible?
Why are you yelling, you lunatic? Then there's the version of the possibilities anecdote where Biden name drops Xi Jinping.
I've said it before. I was in China with Xi Jinping, and he turned to me we each had an interpreter, and he said, "Can you define America for me?" And it's God's true story.
It's a thing that totally happened, I swear. God's true story, guys.
And I said, "Yes, I can," in one word, possibilities. We can do anything when we decide to do it together.
Nothing more inspiring than an old man banging his fist down on a podium and shouting at the audience for no reason. Anyway, when it comes to his speeches, Joe Biden mentions Xi Jinping every chance he gets.
And I had dinner with him and spent, as we traveled around the world together. And I was in 17,000 miles with him in China. And as I said, we were sitting there, and he said, looked at me, he said, "Can you define America for me?" He's a tough guy. It's a God's truth. My word is abiding and said. And I said, absolutely. It's the God's truth. It's the God's true story. And I looked at him, I said, yes. I said, yeah. One word. One word. Possibilities. Possibilities. We can do anything.
Anyway, when it comes to the Biden-Xi Jinping story, there are a couple issues. First, there's this claim.
Xi Jinping, I met with him more times than any other world leader. And I was in 17,000 miles with him in China. I've traveled 17,000 miles with him, the president of China. I traveled 17,000 miles with him in China, the United States, and Asia generally.
Except that 17,000 miles claim is not true and was debunked by the Washington Post in early 2021. A White House official conceded that Biden's line of traveling with Xi is not accurate. This was a reference to the total travel back and forth, both internally in the US and China, and as well as internationally for meetings they held together. But the White House did not offer an explanation for how Biden calculated 17,000 miles. But clearly, it's a number he deems important enough to repeat often. Try as we could, however, we still could not get the travel to add up to 17,000 miles. And with that, the Washington Post gave him 3 Pinocchios. And yet, well over a year following that verdict, Biden continues to repeat the claim.
I guess we traveled 17,000 miles when I was vice president. I don't know that for a fact.
So he doesn't know that for a fact, but he's gonna mention it anyway. What a dolt.
I had a long discussion with Xi Jinping, leader of China. He called to congratulate me. We spent 2 hours on the phone. He said, "You've always said, Mr. President, that you can define America in one word, possibilities." So when I was recently talking with Xi Jinping, he reminded me, he said, I know, as you said, when I asked you to define America, you said I can do it in one word, possibilities, possibilities.
So Joe Biden's answer was so wise, so profound, that Xi talked to him on the phone on 2 separate occasions and was like, remember when you defined America in one word for me? I'm calling bullshit. I demand to see those transcripts. And Biden is apparently so fond of this story that he even brings it up when speaking to other world leaders.
I spent about an hour and a half today with the Japanese Prime Minister. I told him about when President Xi asked me, can I define America, when I was in China with him.
So Biden just calls up world leaders on the phone and is like, you know, I hung out with President Xi and he asked me if I could define America, and hello? So another issue with this story is where Biden claims the event with Xi supposedly took place.
He asked me once, I was in a town called Chengdu on the Tibetan Plateau.
FYI, Chengdu is not a town. It's the 5th largest city by population in the world. I know you might think I'm being picky here, but there's more.
You know, I often say that America can be defined, and I mean this sincerely. I was on a Tibetan plateau with, I think that's where it was, with President Xi of China. Absolutely a true story.
Absolutely a true story, guys. Except for the fact that Chengdu is not located on the Tibetan plateau, but who cares about minor details?
Years ago, when I was vice president, I was in China with him. We were near the Tibetan plateau.
Not sure I would actually use the word near, since Chengdu is about 100 miles away from the very eastern edge of the Tibetan plateau. It's like taking a trip to Allentown, Pennsylvania, and saying you were near New York City. So for clarity, 2 years ago, Biden claimed this all occurred in Chengdu.
And we're in Chengdu, and he says, can you define America for me?
And nearly 2 years later, Biden decided that for some reason, he needed to change where it happened.
I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping.
Okay, so spoiler alert, Biden was never in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping, and we know this for several reasons. First, because Chengdu is approximately 450 miles from the easternmost point of the Himalaya Mountains. And second, according to his itinerary and contemporaneous reporting, there is no mention of Vice President Biden ever visiting the foothills of the Himalayas. And while there are photos of Biden giving a speech at a university, visiting an irrigation system and a high school in Duzhengyan, and having a tea party with Xi, and celebrating at a hotel in Chengdu, there are no photos of Biden anywhere near the Himalayas. Just memes. And there aren't any because, again, it never happened. But with that said, it's probably just a matter of time before Joe Biden claims that he was with Xi on the summit of Mount Everest. Or maybe he's just gonna stick with the whole foothills thing, I don't know.
I was gonna
And right there, I think that's a good place to end it. So be sure to hit that like button, be sure that you're still subscribed to the channel, and I hope to see you next time. If there is next time.